Don't touch that dial. Coming up, a radio program called Radio Disclosure. Are you curious about UFOs? Are you interested in the subject of flying saucers? If you are, this radio show is definitely for you. Dr. Bailey, a Tennessee physician who investigated a UFO encounter as well as some alien life form that appeared on the scene shortly after the sighting. Dr. Bailey also talks about his own personal encounter with the UFO and alien abduction. All of this is coming up on Radio Disclosure, so don't touch that dial. Something new at Radio Disclosure. We have been collecting items of interest, something that you might want. And once a month, we are going to have a drawing and give away some of these items of interest. Now, if you'd like to get your name in the hat, write us an email. Go to radiodisclosure.com. That's radiodisclosure.com. Shoot us an email and tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us that you're interested in the items of interest. We're going to do a drawing once a month, and several people that listen to Radio Disclosure are going to get something really cool. We look forward to hearing from you. Go to our website, radiodisclosure.com, and send us an email. And keep listening and tell your friends about Radio Disclosure. Well, our guest is Dr. Bailey, and he's got a story to tell. At least I have heard this story, or parts of it, and it's disturbing. It really is, because you stop and think about how in the world could this happen to someone or a group of people just innocently sitting in their homes. But if we think about it, go back a ways, there's a story of the Little Green Men up near Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and that was a situation where folks were minding their own business, and like the Creedence Clearwater Revival song, it came out of the sky. And there was a shootout with police on that one. But this is a different story. Dr. Bailey, tell us a little bit about this. Where did this happen?
Well, let me say first, hi, Ted. And this happened in 1996 in Orlinda, Tennessee. What happened is one Sunday afternoon, I was in my basement, and I had a TV down there and was listening, just to the regular news that comes on at night. And this was a local news station out of Nashville, Tennessee, Channel 5. And as a matter of fact, they documented some of the events that happened, so that tape is available. The year was 1996. As I said, I was watching this local news show, and I saw a picture of a man sitting on his back porch, and one of the reporters was asking him what had happened to his dog, and I heard the statement, well, I think an alien bit it. And so as soon as I heard that, I immediately just turned channels, and I said to myself, this is the reason people don't believe in this subject matter, because we have kooks that are out there making fun of it,
All right.
This was on a Sunday night. So the next night, Monday afternoon, the story repeats itself on the TV, except this time it had a little different light. It had shown the story in a completely different light, and it got my attention. And I thought, there must be something up with this. So I called a friend that was interested in the same subjects, UFOs and whatnot. And I decided, this would be good to go out and investigate. And I'll have to admit, I'm not an investigator. But, as a physician, you do have a certain way of looking at evidence. And I'm not saying that I can look at it any better than anybody else. But you keep a certain open mind. But at the same time, you want to be realistic, if you know what I mean.
I would think that a physician is required today, especially by law, and has been for a long time, you have to document everything. You have to keep impeccable paperwork. So you are a trained observer. I mean,
that would be one way of saying it. And I'll have to admit that I did not take a notebook out there. I didn't think we were even going to get near the place. The second story, it just got my attention in such a way that I thought that I've got to check this out. And I didn't want to go out as an investigator. But I took a friend along with me, and we were, as a matter of fact, it was on Tuesday. So this would have been, the event happened on Saturday night. And so this would have been a few days after the event had just happened. And I had some time off, and I said, let's run out there. It was during the day, and I said, let's run out there and just check this out. And, taking somebody with you sometimes helps you get maybe the parties separated, and one can get one side of the story and the other can get the other side of the story. And so going out there, we had to find the place. And, he lived out in the country. And so we drove out to Orlinda, and the first, I guess you could say the first little grocery store out in that area, we stopped in and said, do you know this particular person? And do you know where he lives? And the gentleman that owned the store said, yes, I know him very well. We go to church together, and he lives down this road, and you can go down here and turn left and so forth. And so we said, thank you very much. I said, do you have any opinions about what has been reported on the news? And he said, well, the only thing I can say is I'm a good friend, and when we would go out there to visit the dogs, the two young dogs he has, I think they're Labrador retrievers. One is a golden color, and the other is black. And he said and I mention that because I want to talk about the dogs later and what happened to them. So he said, I noticed that every time I went out there, this is the manager of the store, said that the dogs would just jump up and they're just all over you. They're just a little over a year old.
So
and he went out there
dogs.
right after this event happened, and the dogs just were lethargic, didn't move much, and were just uninteresting. So I thought that was interesting. We've got a little bit of evidence that supports this, even though, because newscasters will go out for a story, and they try not to make any judgments on it. They just want to get what has happened and then present it to the public, and I understand that. But what we did is we ended up in a church parking lot near where he lived and saw a woman parked there getting ready to leave, and we rolled down our window and asked her if she could help us because we were having trouble on the last road getting to the location. Because you've got to understand, he was living in a soybean field, and so it's not so clear, cut, and dry as to get directions from people who live, way out in the country. So she said, well, here's where he lives. He's down the road, and by the way, there were 2 UFOs that my daughter and I personally saw, so I believe what happened to him may have happened. So that got us even more excited.
So these people, this lady had actually seen some things, her and her daughter had...
Actually, yeah, did see some UFOs, something that she couldn't explain, and other friends of hers also saw the same thing.
Well, it seems like there's pockets of these things, when they occur. And I'm wondering, was she able to give you any kind of description at all as to what it was that they saw, or?
We were more concerned about finding his location, and we thanked her for the directions and proceeded. And when we pulled up to the trailer, it was real close to the road. It was a paved road, and there were some large houses across from it. And in the back of his house, like I said, was a large soybean field, but he had quite a bit of room out there. And there was a neighbor next door to him. And so as we were pulling up, and of course we did get information from the store manager that the veterinarians had just left over there. And they wanted to examine the dogs. And so, or they already examined the dogs and had left. And so when we pulled up, we saw in his driveway, we saw somebody pulling away, and I thought that maybe that was the vet that had just left, possibly, or somebody else. And so we knew that he was being inundated, as we later found out, with all sorts of phone calls, people threatening him and calling him a quack.
I don't understand, and that is the ridicule. And this is a real problem because people have an experience of some sort, and as legitimate as it may be, it doesn't take much ridicule along with the fear of what you've just experienced to cause you to just shut up.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
And I didn't want to judge anything. I wanted to just find out. It was more curiosity on my part. As I said, I'm not a UFO investigator and don't claim to be one, but I needed to go out there just personally for myself. I wanted to find out, if this could be the one person of all the cases I'd heard that possibly did have something happen. And so I guess from that standpoint, we saw him heading toward the door. As soon as we pulled up, we saw him heading toward the door and his wife right in behind him. So we knew right then this is not going to be easy. And so his wife did come back out, and she met me just as I got out of the car. And so she said, I'm sorry, but he's tied up, and we haven't had much sleep. And since this event has happened to us, we're just not interested in any more, people coming out. And I said, ma'am, I could certainly understand that, and I'm not here to, question, anything other than I would just like to meet your husband and talk to you and him about what had happened that night. And I think she realized that I wasn't a threat, and she went and got her husband, and they came out and started to warm up to us. And we'd been there for, I guess, from the time we got there, it was about 2 hours. And I didn't expect to stay that long. But what we found out in those 2 hours still sends chills up my spine. I'm, a lot of people can question whether this event really happened or it's his imagination, but what I want to share with you now is some of the things that I actually heard, saw, and what his wife described independently of him and what he described all seemed to match up. When we later got together, we, like I said, my friend that went with me, I'll call him Jerry. And so Jerry was, asking questions. He had 2 young boys, and they were there also. And so we were talking to all of them. And so I asked her to, I actually asked him, I said, well, can you tell us from the beginning what happened? And so this all, and I don't know if you need to take a break here or not, Ted.
I'm doing just fine. I'm on the edge of my chair.
Okay, well,
but I'm going to say something, though.
What I was going to say is,
one thing. Let me make a comment here, though, and that is this, and that is, why in the world, from what you're describing, these are folks that live way out in the country. You say they live way out in the middle of a field, a soybean field. What, in this day and time, what is there to gain from somebody like that for just manufacturing a story when probably their very background, these are church-going people, their very background would prohibit them from probably even talking about it?
Well, that's a good point. And, there's a lot more to this story, and there was actually 3 visits that we went out over a period of 3 months. Let me back up and start from the very first time that he described the story to me. Him and his wife, and again, let me just preference this by saying we later found out that he had a small criminal charge on him that I don't think really. I think back when you look back at somebody's background, I think one little small event can destroy the whole story just because somebody. But this is what makes people normal. They've lived through this. He has 2 sons. He has done carpentry work on the side, and he's also an auto mechanic. And he's just doing the best he can for his family. But nevertheless, I wanted to mention that because I know if some serious investigator wanted to follow up, they may run across that. I think there was some theft that occurred back when he was real young. You know what I'm saying. I don't know the particulars on it, but I did, and again, I researched as much as I could with what I had, and I got there's also a police report. That's somewhere on the internet. The last time I downloaded it, I'd never looked for it again. You got to remember, this has happened more than 13 years ago. They wanted people to leave them alone. The big radio stations in town had started making fun of them the day after this happened, so it was all over the local radio. And it upset him, and it upset his wife. And they were a good, upstanding people that were just trying to do like everybody else out there, make a living and provide for their children. And they certainly didn't want to bring this upon their children. They were ages, I'm going to say 9 and 6, 2 boys. So he said, like I say, I don't know if you need to take a break, but let me go ahead and start with the story the best way I can tell it, and if you need to edit or anything, then, go ahead and do that.
All right, and in the meantime, if you have problems with that telephone, I know I'm hearing a little cracking sound every once in a while. You may be losing your battery there, so if it disappears,
if it does, we'll just have to pick up the conversation.
All right, go ahead.
I'm going to use his real first name because it is out there. I just don't remember the last name right off the bat. But his first name was Glenn. And Glenn told me that Saturday night, he'd had a long day. Him and his wife wanted to retire and watch a movie. And you got to remember, they lived in a trailer. And so the boys were asleep, and he remembered putting the movie in, but he doesn't remember watching the entire movie. The first thing he remembers is hearing this banging sound up under the trailer. And he knew the dogs like to, chase small animals and things such as that. And he assumed that, the dogs are supposedly have cornered something like a possum, and it's, they're banging around up under the trailer. And so he kind of dozed off again and heard that noise again and thought, there's something going on, so I better go outside and check and see what's going on. And so he opens the door to the back deck. The deck's about, I would say, 12 by 16. Just an average size deck that you would have on the back of a trailer. And it sets up off of the ground about, I would say 2 to 2.5, 3 feet. So as soon as he opens the back door, he notices, he called it a creature, that had the trunk that looked like maybe an elephant trunk sticking up over the banister, moving around. And when he saw that, it scared him. He ran inside to get a flashlight so he could investigate a little bit better. And when he came back out, this creature, as he calls it, he used his fist to try to demonstrate exactly what had happened. And as he looked to the left when he opened the door for the first time on the deck, the creature kind of poked its head up. If the fist represented the head and the arm represented this creature's neck, it kind of poked up and looked over the banister at him and then started moving around. So after getting the flashlight, he comes out, he shines the light on this creature, and it starts going into a glowing ball like a white light, and then moving around in the yard erratically. So then he goes back in the house and gets his shotgun. At this time, the boys were still inside the house. And I'm not sure exactly where the wife was, but I think she knew something was going on and was probably just awake in the bedroom. When he took the shotgun, when he took the shotgun and pointed at the creature, again, it went into a ball of glowing white light and reappeared instantaneously on the other side of his yard. And there's no creature that we know of that can move that fast. So his sons come out, and at this time, too, there is a red laser coming from what they say was a UFO glowing above a radio tower that was located, I'm going to say a half a mile. You could see the blinking red light, but it was within a half a mile or a mile of their house. and it was shooting. Now, it was closer to their house. When they saw it on another occasion, it was over the tower. And if you could locate that date and get those transmitter logs, I'm sure you'd find out that they had some sort of disruptive interference in their broadcast that night. But again, this is occurring around 2 or 3 in the morning. So this laser that he called it, this red laser, was tracking the creature as it moved. And when his sons came out, they noticed the laser hit their father's neck, and he put the gun, and he walked back in the house, put the gun down. He describes it as like he felt like his heart was about to explode out of his chest. And the entire backyard was lit up like it was daytime. And they could still see this red laser.
We'll be right back with our guest, Dr. Bailey, talking about the UFO incident in Orlinda, Tennessee, right after this. You can transform any surface into a self-cleaning, antibacterial, antifungal, mold-free surface. Let it purify your surrounding air and protect your building interior and exterior from environmental contamination. Any germs, oils, fumes, smells, or even little algae spores which land on a surface near tie docks will be remediated in minutes. Any exterior building surface we wish to keep clean needs to receive a little light and be coated with tie docks. Tie docks coating destroys viruses, bacteria, odor, harmful gases, allergens, air and water pollutants, and protects treated surfaces against the growth of algae, fungus, and mold. For more information on how you can use tie docks in your home or your place of business, contact LightPack Systems. Go to their website, lightpacksystems.com, spelled LightPackSystems, lightpacksystems.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, back to our guest, physician Dr. Bailey, speaking about the UFO incident in Orlinda, Tennessee.
So his sons, again, stated this fact also, that it caused him to just go in the house, put the gun up, and sit on the couch for just a second and settle down. He said it felt like a calming effect, and he didn't know he was hit by anything. It was his sons that told him later, and then when they looked at his neck, it was red. There was a red blotch in that area where the laser hit him. We didn't see anything like that, but, if something... we didn't get there until 3 days later, so it could have cleared up. Now let's move to the dogs. Later, when he looked at the dogs, there was a scar that was on the blonde dog, and it was on his hind quarter. And it looked to me like that it would be the exact place you would go in if you were going to puncture somebody to get into the abdominal aorta to get some blood. But when you look at the scar, the creature or whatever attacked his dog didn't quite get through. All it did was leave the outline. There were 2 scars, I would say between 3 to 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches long. But when you look at the scars, they were completely, what the veterinarians that examined the dogs, what they stated was there was no way that an injury like that, like they saw, could heal as quick as it did. And no scab formations. And so it went against even medical science. Months later, when we went to look at the dogs, we noticed that the hair did grow back through where the scar was, and usually hair doesn't grow back through scar tissue. It's just too tough. So whatever it was that caused the 2 marks on those dogs, I can tell you it defied anything I've ever seen. So, and the other dog wasn't touched, but I think the other dog, the reason it was also I think it was frightened, and so I think something happened in those dogs, just, became lethargic, didn't want to play, and just laid around all day. So I asked his wife, at that time I think I separated and started asking his wife some of these questions, and I think my friend at that time began to ask Glenn, some of the rest of the story. What she told me then was that this light that was just encompassing all over the house, that this event happened for a 2 to 3 hour period just before sunrise. And at one point, they were all huddled in a corner at the back door of their house, and the intensity of this field effect that they were in, I really can't describe it. Or all they said was it looked like that it was complete daylight, except when you look out, you can see that you can't see, certain things out beyond a certain point, but everything was lit up. And that morning she woke up and everything in the house was fried. The cell phone, the TV, microwave, anything electronic in the house was totally fried, didn't work. To call the first thing this family did when they had this happen to them was they called the highway patrol.
Yeah, who else are you going to call?
The highway patrolman was sent out there, but he had to go to the neighbor's house to borrow the phone to call them. And so that was around 8 o'clock. I don't think they wanted to wake the neighbors up right away, but I think they did immediately. As soon as they could, they went over and used the neighbor's phone. She said when morning came, she saw, you could still feel, they described it as a feeling, this energy around the house and outside. And since he was a mechanic, they had about 6 or 7 cars parked. Some were working, some were, for clients that he would fix. And that a couple of them had these large whip antennas on the back. I don't know if you're familiar with those. And some regular antennas. And those antennas were moving. All of them were moving back and forth, like a vibration was moving them. And the car looked like, it's called a greenhouse effect inside a car when there's an energy field outside. It takes all the moisture and causes the windows to fog. So all the windows were fogged up, and that was strange to them, and the batteries were drained dead. So they had no way to go anywhere. They had to call, and the first person they called was the highway patrolman. He gets out there at about 8 o'clock in the morning, takes him down to the Tennessee Highway Patrol place and takes his story. And his story is documented. This is something you can go look up. And the highway patrolman had made a statement that was, not a criticizing statement, but made a statement that he believed that this man experienced something that night. So you have the highway patrolman thinking something happened. You have other people that were in that community that witnessed things, and probably more, but just the ones that aren't talking. And so the morning that she started to, I have to back up and say that where the creature was standing, I wanted to look and see if there were any imprints. And it just so happened, and this is where it's going to get a little weird here now, it just so happens it looked like there was a footprint. And it didn't look like, it looked kind of like it might have been a chicken or a duck or something along those lines. You could actually see the organic, the cellular structure in the webbing of the foot on it, because it was in fresh mud. Was it slight? There'd been a few rains before this event had happened.
Was this larger than a chicken print?
Well, I'd say it was probably about that size, maybe a little bit bigger, though. I immediately I said, you need to get this. We need to take it out, and we need to get it and preserve this evidence, because I said, this is important evidence. But he said, look, I got a call from Newfound, and they were going to come out and investigate this, and they said, don't let anybody touch anything. Now, he also showed me, and he actually saw this during the time he was having this encounter with this creature. He actually saw the creature on his deck moving around and showed me the creature's fingerprints, and it looked like moss on his... are you familiar with the mechanic's toolbox, the one that sets up about 4 foot high that has the chrome drawers and things?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. He showed me the actual fingerprints. There were this creature either only has 2 fingers and one thumb, or three fingers, one thumb, or something's, or somebody just didn't touch that part of it. If it was human, if he attempted to make this look like a real event, then that would have been incredible. But he couldn't have faked the dog injuries, because that, even with the veterinarian report, says there's something strange here. And here's the other thing that's strange that I discovered, and I don't know if anybody else discovered this. On the deck, there was an old coffee table that was sitting on the deck. Now, I know for people that don't have decks, these are plank decks made out of pressure-treated lumber. And this coffee table that was set, he described that when this creature was on his deck, it was moving around erratically on the deck, and he could see these flashes going on. And he showed me the marks, and it looked like as if you'd taken a nickel or something where metal would rub off and scraped across, because you could see the discoloration. And I said, well, it looked like somebody could take a coin or something metal and create those lines. He says, no, and I looked closer, and there was no indentation. And it looked like carbon residue. So I convinced myself, just looking at the marks, that it didn't look like anything that if somebody were attempting to do, then they did it with a softer object, and they actually were purposely trying to make these marks. So I'm not an investigator, but I noticed that if you ever notice how mildew collects around the base of an object sitting outside, if you move the object, you notice that you break the seal, and you can tell if an object's been moved or not, especially this coffee table out on the deck. When I asked him, I said, do you mind if I move? Because I saw the marks going through the coffee table. And I thought, well, that's strange. How would these marks end up pointing to the coffee table, go under it, and then come out on the other side in the same direction? I thought, that's kind of strange. So I said, do you mind if I lift the coffee table up? When I lifted it up, I could tell that it had been lifted up for the very first time. And when I saw the mark continue through the table, chills went up my back again. I thought, that's strange. Now, when the highway patrolman brought Glenn back, his wife, after the patrolman dropped her husband off, he went to try to get some sleep. She was at the kitchen window of her trailer and looked out of it and saw this same creature stick its head up out of the ditch just right across the road, and must have been no more than 100 feet.
You know, people who listen to, say, for example, Coast to Coast, or they're familiar, they get exposed to this stuff, they may be a bit more familiar with it, but for someone that's not following it, and from what you're talking about, this is... Well,
that was in 1996, and like I say, at that time, I think you were the first person to tell me to referred me to the Coast to Coast show.
Well, I guess the thing is, these folks that are living in rural Tennessee, and they're just
wait
not...
a minute, I live in rural Tennessee, too. But,
I know, but I mean, but these people are not...
It's a good place. It's just like anywhere else you would go if it were in Kentucky, or if it were in... upstate New York. People that live out in the country, they tend to be a little more realistic about things when it comes to what they observe. And, sure there are kooks out there. I don't deny that at all. But I didn't see any ulterior motive for this family to take on all of the press, the media. I mean, it was a maelstrom for the first few days. They had two major radio stations in Nashville that were, it was the hot topic of the day. Did you hear about the guy out there who saw a UFO and the aliens attacked his dog? And I think the thing that interested me is the fact that when we went back later on a subsequent trip, one of the first things I wanted to do was look at the scars on that same dog. And when I saw, here's what was strange: the dog was blonde, And in those 2 scars, there was black hair growing through where the scar would have been. You could actually see 2 dark dashes on the dog's rear side, or not rear side, but up along the lower quadrant on a human. It would be on a dog. And like I said, those marks were made in an anatomically correct way. If you were going to go in and, say, extract blood from the aorta, that would be where you would want to go. So I thought that was strange, too. So we've got somebody that, supposedly had witnessed and experienced this ordeal for something like 2 to 3 hours, Saturday night, Sunday morning. More like Sunday morning.
So I guess my question is, what, based on everything that you saw and everything that the story that was told to you, and you've made several trips out there, were you ever able to reach any kind of conclusion or form any sort of opinion as to what all of that was about?
Well, that's why on the final visit, I knew the third visit was it. I wasn't going to go back out there again. A friend of mine who is a theatrical agent has worked for some of the big companies in Hollywood, Carsey Warner, and they always told me, they were good friends of mine, and it was her. She always told me, she said, look, if you find anything, she was into the strange too, because we used to talk about UFOs. She said, if you ever run across anything strange out here, she wanted to do a story on a particular camp where people were murdered, and she wanted me to get information on, but she said, anytime you get a story that's got any strangeness to it, let me know. I know a person in Hollywood that would love to run with it. And so that's why on the third visit, I made that offer to them. And I told her, I know somebody who, with this information, you could benefit financially from this, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And I'll have to say, I did go back out there in '99 with another friend, a different friend, and we found the trailer, but there was nobody living there. He's moved on somewhere. Maybe somebody did buy a story, and they're waiting to make a big movie on it or something. Ted.
Well, I rather doubt that, but I also. Folks that come public with these things, either they're this total mass victim of ridicule. They get totally ridiculed, or they get paid a visit and they're told, do not share this with the general public.
When I told his wife when we first got there, I did hear some rants on the radio about that, and I knew he was getting quite a bit of criticism. So. That was, I think, another reason they did come out to talk to us, because at first I told them that I thought there was something that had happened out here. It was, like I said, the second news show that I saw on this. It just made me think, and then he later told me that he had contacted the radio station that first aired it and kind of jumped on him for making him look like an idiot, a fool, And because of the story, you can take, in media, you can slice it and dice it the way you want to deliver it. And so it just didn't show him in a good light.
And that's really a shame.
He asked them to run another story, but this time to show the other parts of the story they left out. And the camera, Channel 5, out of Nashville, did film the foot imprint. As best as I can tell, they also filmed the fingerprints on the toolbox when they were doing the story, and that was the one I saw on the second showing. So, like I said, if he went to all this trouble, and as I understand, he was, he could use money. He was telling me that things were tight and that he, had obligations and things like that, but they weren't interested financially. I do know that for a fact. Whatever happened out there on that July night of 1996, I believe it was a real event.
Well, I guess the other thing I was going to say, too, and not getting off the beating path, but I spoke with you before about this, and I've shared with you some of the experiences, and we've talked back and forth. But there's a lot of folks that are very skeptical over the fact that folks that shine lights up in the sky, powerful, just regular, beam lights.
Well, the first night we did it, we saw something.
Yeah, if I recall, I don't know if you were there then, but there was one particular event when after the lights had been shined in the sky a little bit, there was some Air Force jets that went over, and they went over rather low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's funny, and I certainly don't want to get into my personal story, but I did have one. I think one of the reasons I was interested in the UFO phenomena is because of what happened to me and my wife, and I think it was about 6 years prior to this. And one of the things that hit me like a ton of bricks was one morning, and I won't go into what happened, but the morning that I left to go find out what that was in the field across the interstate from where I lived, I was my cars were all had that fogged up thing going on, and the batteries were drained. And that night, my wife, every time I would bring up the subject of UFOs, my wife didn't want to hear that. She would say, when we were at parties, when we were younger and stuff, she would always say, well, please don't talk about that, because it might upset some people. So I never really mentioned it to her anymore. And that one night that she woke up the next morning, and the first words out of her mouth was, "You're not going to believe this, but I think I was abducted by an alien."
Oh.
Now, we had a couple over that night, spending the night, and the dogs were barking all night. They never barked, the neighbors' dogs. We didn't have any dogs, but and they barked all night long. But the first thing that we noticed, I guess I have led myself into this. The first thing we noticed when we woke up at about 2 a.m, and God, I don't know what time it was. It could have been 2 or 3. Is there was a light in our room that was so bright there were no shadows. And I kept looking over there. We had a pretty big bedroom with a sitting area over to the left. And I kept looking, and we had also windows on the other side of the room. And normally, and the interstate's so far away that if any tractor-trailer light going down the interstate were to come in, it would be moving. You'd see the shadows. That's not what we saw, and so I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was just this bright, bright light. And so I went back to bed. Now, knowing me, I would have been up looking out the window. Well, I did get back up. My wife, she was about 8 months pregnant, and so I was concerned about her. We I told her, I said, please do not go down the steps. Just use the restroom upstairs, and she promised me she would. And well, she didn't have a reason to go downstairs except to check on the kids occasionally. So I woke back up, and I noticed that she wasn't in bed. And I thought, well, she's gone to the restroom. I'll give her just a minute. And she didn't come back to bed, so I got up. I looked in the bathroom. She wasn't there. I went downstairs. I looked in through the entire house that she would obviously have to go, and she wasn't there. And I was walking back up to the bedroom. I go over to the windows, and I look out, and I got to say, what kind of light was coming in? And I look over across the field, in a vacant field, and all I see is a city of green, red lights, white lights, and it looked to me like a second shift or third shift that's working, and that's why that's over there. It was almost as if I convinced myself that's nothing, it's just somebody working all night. Go back to bed. I go back to bed, and when I wake up that morning, my wife's there. Now, why would I have not? I would have never gone back to bed if my wife was missing, 8 months pregnant. There's no way. But something convinced me to go back to bed. So that morning, I finally got a car started. We had 3 cars. And on one of them, I finally got the car started to go get some eggs that morning. And I said, I'm going to look at that vacant field and see if there's anything there. There's got to be a factory there from what I saw. And when I looked over in the field, there was nothing there. I go back home. We fix breakfast. The company says, what's the deal about these dogs? We saw this light. I couldn't sleep, hearing these dogs all night long. And we pretty much forgot about it, and I didn't even think about it. This is another thing strange, Ted. I didn't even talk about it or think about it for 10 years after that. Until, maybe 6 years after that. And all of a sudden, we were watching, my daughter and I heard the story coming on with Whitney Strieber, Communion, and I said, "Good, we got to watch this. This will be interesting," because I'd read the book. And as we were watching the movie, there was an event that happened when his wife, the same similar situation happened, except it was with Whitney, and I was like his wife, being subdued somehow by whatever was going on to not get up. And that's when it hit me, and all those memories came back.
That's amazing. And there's a lot of folks that have had similar circumstances, way too many, to discount and to say, well, this is just, sleep paralysis. This is just...
Well, I've heard all those experts. Sleep paralysis, I've had sleep paralysis, and it's just sleep paralysis. But these events, there was no sleep paralysis. It was there was something going on, and I was totally conscious. A lot of people say, well, maybe you thought you were doing this, and you were just having a dream. But the company we had over, similar to what Whitney Strieber's account was, where they had company over that night, and all they wanted to do was just leave and get out of there. And shortly after breakfast, our company did the same thing. They just wanted to leave and get out of there.
Well, can you blame them?
Something happened that night.
I'm sure they had a very strange feeling and a sensation. I mean, things like that going on tend to leave.
They never came back to spend another night with us after that. We tried to tell them it's okay. We're not, but it, I really do. I think there's something going on. Well, I know there's something going on. It's not a matter of thinking. I'm past the point of the UFO sighting. And I know I don't want to be, trite with that. But I want to see physical evidence. I'm more, I guess from my background, I would love to see physical evidence,
I'm glad, though, you related
me, but unfortunately I haven't seen anything like that.
I'm glad you related the story, though, of what happened to you, because it somewhat explains to the audience your interest in the subject, because once something happens, it gets your attention, and you tend to look up more than you ever have before. That wraps up this edition of Radio Disclosure. A special thanks to our guests, Emmy Award-winning science reporter Linda Moulton Howe and physician Dr. Bailey. Stay tuned next week, same time, same station, for Radio Disclosure.